Here is an Esper Super Friends deck, Esper Control with Planeswalkers. It's actually similar to the deck I made a Pro Tour Top 8 with, and it's because the deck doesn't play that many win conditions. It relies on removal, card advantage, and then just getting a Planeswalker down, and then churning the Planeswalker to victory. There's a lot of lands in the deck. The deck has a lot of discard filtering, so excess lands are fine. You can discard them quite easily. And it is a 3-color mana base, so the mana is not perfect, but it's reasonable enough. At turn 2, we've got Grasp of Darkness, typical spot removal spell, best black spot removal spell in the format. 1 ultimate price as well. Transgress is the only discard in the main deck, but Transgress the Mind is a very versatile card. Yes, it's not that good against mono white, but it can get you out of a lot of tight spots, and knowing what your opponent's hand allows you to situate your removal appropriately. Jace Vryn's Prodigy is the primary creature of the deck. There's 4 copies. And remember, this card can become a Planeswalker. And in this deck, it flips pretty routinely, actually. And there's so many different instants and sorceries to flash back that it's quite nice. 4 copies of Jace Vryn's Prodigy's friend, Oath of Jace. So, this is a relatively new addition to the deck. It's a 3-mana card, draw 3, discard 2. So it's not exactly card advantage, because you're basically only replacing itself as far as a card, but the fact that it can filter a bunch of excess lands, it stays on the battlefield. That's the key. It stays on the battlefield, and it allows you to scry. The scry can become your scrying 2, your scrying 3, and it just puts the game over the top. So it also helps you flip Jace Vryn's Prodigy quite quickly, and it's an enchantment for Delirium. So there's a lot going for Oath of Jace, and there's 4. Then we've got some singletons as well. We've got 1 Liliana the Last Hope, and some of our Planeswalkers are 1 and 2 ofs. We're not necessarily overloading on them. 1 Anguished Unmaking, exile removal spell at instant speed is important to at least have 1 of those. And here's another card that can deal with Planeswalkers. We've got a Ruinous Path. Personally, I like to have a good matchup against the aggro decks. There's lots of aggressive decks, mid-range decks, decks with creatures. Lots of creatures in the format right now. So there's 4 copies of Languish. Lots of other decks do not play 4 Languishes, but the card is just so important in so many spots that you really want to have it. And perfectly happy to have the full play set here. There's also 2 Narset, so if the board is somewhat clear, you can just play Narset on turn 4, tick it up, and you're off to the races at that point. And Dark Petition is a great card to be able to rebound off of Narset. There's 2 Dark Petitions. Dark Petition can find you your win conditions, your Planeswalkers, what have you. It can get you out of a lot of tight spots. Normally, you will have Spell Mastery for it. There's 1 Ob Nixilis as the 5-mana Planeswalker of choice. And then 1 Slumgar's Command. Slumgar's Command can be very good. It's a card which you can reveal off Narset and find with Dark Petition that kills a Planeswalker, and then you can get an added bonus to go along with it. Now, at 6 mana, we've got 2 Sorin Grim Nemesis, one of the most powerful Planeswalkers in the format, and it can gain you life, so once you get it down, climb up to a reasonable life total. There's 1 Dragonlord Slumgar. This card is important against other Planeswalker decks. You can steal their planeswalkers, and against some decks in the format, those decks do not have that many ways to actually answer a Dragonlord Slumgar. Alright, now we have our 6-mana Wrath. We're pretty likely to hit Delirium with this deck. So Descend Upon the Sinful, not only is it a 6-mana Wrath of God, it exiles the creatures. So against decks with recursion, those creatures are gone forever. And then you're getting a 4/4 white angel token for your troubles as well. So it's worth the 6 mana that goes into it. And then there's the big whammy, of course, one of the primary win conditions of the deck, the Emrakul, the Promised End. We're not a full-on Delirium deck, but we can definitely get there. So casting this card on turn 8 isn't, we can cast it whenever we want to. We control the board, then we cast Emrakul, and it should be pretty simple to win after that. So, looking at the sideboard, we've got some cards against the Blue-Red Fevered Vision deck. 3 copies of Peace of Mind, so that you're able to discard cards and gain a bunch of life, and you're not really worried about Fevered Visions killing you out of that deck. 2 Duress and 1 Transgress for some additional discard. 1 Summary Dismissal against the Emerge decks, the Kozilek's Return decks, those types of strategies. Summary Dismissal is also a good answer to other copies of Emrakul. Ojutai's Command is similarly a counterspell. It can bring back a copy of Jace Vryn's Prodigy, which is nice. 2 copies of Kalitas. Kalitas is a card that you're going to bring in a lot of matchups against any of the Bant decks. You pretty much always board in Kalitas. It's good against the blue-black zombie deck, basically a lot of the creature decks in the format. There's 1 Infinite Obliteration against the other Emrakul decks and big creature decks. Liliana the Last Hope is against some of the smaller decks like humans. You want ways to kill those 1 toughness creatures. It's also a nice value planeswalker in some spots. And then the Coax from the Blind Eternities, you'll see the Emrakul on the sideboard. That's actually not to bring in. That's to keep in the sideboard. We'll bring in the Coax from the Blind Eternities. That way, if our opponent actually is able to successfully Infinite Obliteration our Emrakul, we still have Coax from the Blind Eternities left in our deck. We can cast it and get the Emrakul from the sideboard, and that's awesome. And then 1 copies of Orbs of Warding. We're seeing Orbs of Warding pop up as a way to answer Emrakul, answer the blue-red burn deck, and there's some spots where it just comes down and it completely changes the landscape of the game. And remember that any one of in the sideboard we can Dark Petition for, so there's a reason why there's only 1 copy in the board. And yep, this is the list. Pretty excited to get some games in with it, even though I'm already pretty familiar with this type of strategy.